She lived like a ghost in her own home, unseen, unheard, erased by a stepmother who feared her beauty and a father too weak to protect her. But one forbidden night, Matilda Haynes defied everything and slipped into the grandest ball of the season. And when Duke Stephen Doyle, the most powerful man in London, took her hand in front of everyone, he didn't just ask her to dance. He declared war on the woman who tried to bury her. But here's the question. Can a single moment of recognition undo years of cruelty? Or will her stepmother destroy everything before Matilda can escape? Subscribe now, because what happens next will leave you breathless. If you love stories of hidden women rising, powerful men who protect fiercely, and villains who crumble under their own poison, this channel is for you. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a chapter. Trust me, you'll want to see how Matilda Haynes becomes unstoppable. Matilda Haynes used to be loved. She remembers her mother's warmth, her father's laughter, the way the household staff smiled when she walked by. But that was before her mother died, before grief hollowed her father out, before Victoria arrived, beautiful, charming, and deadly. Victoria didn't need violence to destroy Matilda. She used whispers instead. Lies woven so carefully that society believed Matilda was improper, reckless, inappropriate. Invitations stopped coming. Friends turned away. Her father, drowning in guilt and manipulation, believed every word Victoria fed him. For 2 years, Matilda lived as a ghost, locked in her room during social events, forbidden from attending gatherings, isolated from everyone who once loved her. Victoria made sure Matilda knew her place. Invisible, irrelevant, powerless. But invisibility has its advantages, because no one was watching the night Lady Charlotte Winslow smuggled Matilda into the Ashford Ball. And when Duke Stephen Doyle's eyes found her across that glittering ballroom, when he crossed the floor, ignoring every eligible woman in London, and extended his hand to the girl everyone said didn't exist, everything changed. What follows is a battle between power and poison, between a woman who refuses to stay broken and a villain who will stop at nothing to destroy her. Because when a duke chooses you publicly, he doesn't just save you, he makes you untouchable. Or does he? Matilda Haynes had learned to move silently. It was a survival skill she'd perfected over 2 years, the art of existing without being noticed. She knew which floorboards creaked, which hallways her stepmother frequented, which hours of the day offered the most invisibility. Because in the Haynes household, being seen meant being destroyed. The morning light filtered through her bedroom curtains, the same curtains that had been drawn for 23 months. Matilda sat at her vanity, brushing her dark hair with mechanical precision, watching her own reflection fade with each passing day. She was 22 years old and felt ancient. How does someone become invisible in their own home? Slowly, carefully, one lie at a time. Downstairs, she could hear Victoria's laughter, bright, musical, perfectly calibrated for her father's benefit. Thomas Haynes, once a strong man, now a ghost himself, hollowed out by grief and manipulation. Matilda remembered when her father used to look at her with pride, when he'd call her his brightest star. When her mother was alive, their home was filled with warmth instead of ice. But that was before Victoria. The knock on her door was soft, too soft to be Victoria, who preferred to burst in unannounced, violating Matilda's only sanctuary. Miss Matilda, Mrs. Clara Bennet, the housekeeper, slipped inside quickly, her weathered face tight with concern. "You haven't eaten." "I'm not hungry." "That's what you said yesterday, and the day before." Mrs. Bennet set down a tray of tea and toast. "She's planning something. I can feel it." Matilda's hands stilled on the brush. "She's always planning something." "This is different." Mrs. Bennet's voice dropped to a whisper. "She's been writing letters, sealing them herself. And I heard her tell your father that you've been improper with the gardener." The accusation hit like a physical blow. "I haven't even seen the gardener in weeks," Matilda breathed. "I know, but your father doesn't." Mrs. Bennet's eyes filled with sorrow. "He believes everything she says now." How does a man who once loved his daughter become her jailer? The answer was simple. Slowly, through poison disguised as devotion. The afternoon brought the usual torment. Victoria swept into Matilda's room without knocking, her golden hair perfectly arranged, her green eyes sharp with malice. She was beautiful, devastatingly so, and she wielded that beauty like a weapon. "Matilda, darling," Victoria's voice dripped with false sweetness. "Your father and I are hosting the Caldwell family for dinner tonight. You'll take your meal in your room, of course." "Of course," Matilda replied quietly. "We can't have you embarrassing us, not after the incident with Lord Pemberton's son." Victoria examined her nails. "Really, throwing yourself at him so desperately. Thank heavens your father stopped you before you ruined yourself completely. The incident that never happened. The lie that became truth through repetition. I never spoke to Lord Pemberton's son," Matilda said, her voice barely audible. Victoria's smile sharpened. "That's not what he said. And who would believe you over a gentleman?" She moved closer, her perfume suffocating. "You're fortunate your father loves you enough to hide your shame. Most girls with your reputation would have been sent away entirely. Reputation built on lies. Shame manufactured from nothing." Victoria leaned in, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper. "You're nothing, Matilda. A ghost. And that's all you'll ever be." She left in a swirl of silk, and Matilda sat frozen, her hands trembling in her lap. How much can a person endure before they break? Matilda was beginning to discover her limit. The knock came at midnight. Matilda was still awake. She was always awake these days, when she heard the soft tap, tap, tap on her window. Her heart lurched. No one came to her window. No one came to her at all. She crossed to the glass and saw a familiar face below. Lady Charlotte Winslow, her childhood friend, the only person who'd never abandoned her, stood in the garden with a pebble in her hand and desperation in her eyes. Matilda opened the window carefully, praying the hinges wouldn't creak. "Charlotte, what are you—" "Come down," Charlotte hissed. "Now, we don't have too much time." "I can't. If Victoria discovers I've left—" "The Ashford ball is tomorrow night." Charlotte's voice was urgent. "Every eligible person in London will be there, including Duke Stephen Doyle." "The Duke of Ashford, the most powerful unmarried man in England." "What does that have to do with me?" Matilda asked, though something in her chest had begun to flutter. Something she thought Victoria had killed long ago. "Hope. Everything," Charlotte said fiercely. "Victoria's been telling everyone you're improper, reckless, inappropriate. But Matilda, you've been locked in this house for 2 years. No one has actually seen you. They're believing rumors about a ghost. So? So we make you real again." Charlotte's eyes blazed. "You come to the ball. You let people see that you're not what Victoria says you are. You remind society that Matilda Haynes exists. Victoria will never allow it. Neither will my father. Then we don't ask permission." Charlotte reached up toward the window. "I have a dress, a carriage, a plan, and all you have to do is climb down." The choice hung in the air between them. Stay invisible, stay safe, stay broken, or risk everything for one night of being seen. Matilda thought about Victoria's smile, her father's weakness, the life she'd once had, the life she'd lost, the years stretching ahead of her, empty, silent, erased. What's the worst that could happen? Could it possibly be worse than this? "Give me 5 minutes," Matilda whispered. She moved through her room like a thief, gathering what little she'd need. A shawl, her mother's pearls, the only thing Victoria hadn't managed to take from her. A small amount of courage she'd been hoarding for exactly this moment. Mrs. Bennet appeared in the doorway, eyes wide. "I heard voices," the housekeeper whispered. Then she saw Matilda's face, the determination there, and understood immediately. "The ball?" Matilda nodded. Mrs. Bennet's weathered face broke into the first real smile Matilda had seen in months. "Your mother would be so proud." She pressed something into Matilda's hand. "Emergency funds, just in case. If Victoria discovers you helped—" "Let her!" Mrs. Bennet's voice was steel. "I've watched that woman torture you long enough. Go, live and don't you dare come back without a future worth fighting for." The climb down the trellis was terrifying and exhilarating. Charlotte waited below with a cloak, and together they ran through the darkened garden, past the sleeping house, past the gates that had held Matilda prisoner for so long. The carriage was waiting. Charlotte bundled Matilda inside, and as the horses began to move, Matilda looked back at the Haynes household, at her prison, and felt something crack open in her chest. Freedom. Terrifying, dangerous, intoxicating freedom. What if this changes nothing? Matilda asked as they rolled toward London. Charlotte squeezed her hand. What if it changes everything? Neither of them knew that tomorrow night, Duke Stephen Doyle would look across a ballroom and see a girl everyone said didn't exist. Neither of them knew that a single dance would start a war. But Matilda Haynes was about to discover something Victoria had tried desperately to make her forget. Some people refuse to stay invisible. What happens when Matilda walks into that ballroom? Will anyone recognize her? Or will Victoria's lies have poisoned everyone against her? And when the most powerful duke in England notices the girl no one else can see, what will he do? The Ashford Ball was legendary. Held annually at the Duke's London residence, it was the event that defined the social season. Invitations were coveted like crowns. Attendance meant you mattered. Absence meant you didn't exist. Matilda Haynes had not received an invitation in 2 years. Now she stood outside the massive doors, Charlotte's hand gripping hers, wearing a borrowed gown of deep sapphire silk that made her dark hair look like midnight and her eyes luminous. I can't, Matilda whispered, her courage fracturing. Charlotte, what if— No! Charlotte turned to face her, fierce and unwavering. You've spent 2 years asking what if. Tonight you find out. The doors opened, music spilled out, violins and laughter, and the sound of a world Matilda had been exiled from. She stepped inside. The ballroom was breathtaking. Crystal chandeliers caught the candlelight and threw it back in golden waves. Women in silk and jewels moved like flowers in a garden, and men in perfectly tailored evening wear navigated between them with practiced ease. Everything was beautiful, elegant, impossible, and everyone turned to look. They see me. Oh God, they actually see me. Matilda felt the stares like physical touches, curious, assessing, confused. Whispers rippled through the crowd. Is that Miss Haynes? I thought she'd been sent away. Wasn't there a scandal? She looks nothing like the rumors suggested. Charlotte squeezed her hand once, then released it. Walk like you belong here, because you do. Matilda lifted her chin and walked into the ballroom. Duke Stephen Doyle was bored. He stood near the far wall, a glass of champagne in hand, watching the usual parade of eligible young women and their calculating mothers. At 30 years old, he'd perfected the art of polite disinterest. He knew what they wanted: his title, his wealth, his name. What they didn't know was that Stephen Doyle valued intelligence over beauty and honesty over performance. And every woman here tonight was performing. His closest friend, Lord Edmund Grey, appeared at his elbow. Another thrilling evening of avoiding matrimony. Riveting, Stephen replied dryly. Lady Margaret's daughter is staring at you again. Third time this month, she's— Edmund stopped mid-sentence. Waited. Who is that? Stephen followed his friend's gaze, and everything stopped. A young woman stood near the entrance, clearly terrified but refusing to show it. Dark hair swept up to reveal a graceful neck. A sapphire gown that should have looked expensive but somehow looked borrowed. And eyes, even from across the room, Stephen could see her eyes, wide, vulnerable, and carrying the weight of someone who'd survived something terrible. She didn't look like the other women. She looked real. That's Matilda Haynes, Edmund murmured. Thomas Haynes's daughter. I thought she'd been sent away? Stephen's eyes never left her. That's what I'd heard as well. There were rumors, inappropriate behavior, some scandal with Lord Pemberton's son. Edmund shook his head. Though I never believed it. The Pemberton boy is an idiot who couldn't seduce him. Stephen was already moving. He cut through the crowd with the kind of purpose that made people step aside automatically. Whispers followed him. Of course they did. When Duke Stephen Doyle moved with intention, people noticed, and he was walking directly toward Matilda Haynes. Matilda saw him coming, and her heart stopped. She knew who he was. Everyone knew Duke Stephen Doyle. Tall, imposing, with dark hair and eyes that seemed to see through every pretense. He was known for his brilliance in Parliament his shrewdness in business, and his absolute refusal to tolerate dishonesty. He was walking toward her. Why was he walking toward her? The crowd parted. Conversations died. Every eye in the ballroom locked onto them. Stephen stopped directly in front of her and bowed, properly, respectfully, as though she were a queen and not a social pariah. Miss Haynes, his voice was deep, cultured, and surprisingly gentle. I don't believe we've been properly introduced. I'm Stephen Doyle. The Duke of Ashford just introduced himself to her, as if she didn't know, as if she mattered. Your Grace, Matilda managed, dropping into a curtsy that Charlotte had made her practice in the carriage. I know who you are. Then you have the advantage. His eyes, gray, intelligent, impossibly focused, studied her face. Because I very much want to know who you are. What does that mean? Is he mocking me? Can he see how terrified I am? I'm no one, Your Grace. I doubt that very much. He extended his hand. Would you honor me with the next dance? The ballroom held its breath. Matilda stared at his hand, strong, steady, offered without hesitation. This was a test. It had to be, or a joke, or some elaborate cruelty she couldn't yet understand. But Charlotte's voice echoed in her mind. You've spent 2 years asking what if. Tonight you find out. Matilda placed her hand in his. The moment Stephen led her onto the dance floor, the orchestra began a waltz. His hands settled at her waist, proper, respectful, but somehow intimate. Her hand rested on his shoulder. And when they began to move, Matilda discovered something shocking. She remembered how to dance. Muscle memory from a life before Victoria, before isolation, before invisibility. You're trembling, Stephen observed quietly. I haven't danced in 2 years, Matilda admitted before she could stop herself. Why not? How do you explain imprisonment to someone who's never been caged? I haven't been invited to balls in quite some time, Your Grace. Stephen, he corrected, and that seems like a tremendous oversight on society's part. They turned and Matilda caught sight of the watching crowd, hundreds of faces all trained on them. She felt exposed, vulnerable, like prey in an open field. Everyone's staring, she whispered. Let them. Stephen's voice was certain, unbothered. Do you know what I see when I look at you, Miss Haynes? A scandal waiting to happen. His laugh was unexpected, genuine and warm. No, I see someone who's surviving something. I see strength pretending to be fragility. I see a woman who walked into this ballroom knowing she'd be judged and did it anyway. He guided her through a turn. That takes remarkable courage. Matilda's eyes stung with unexpected tears. No one had called her courageous in so long. No one had seen her in so long. The rumors about me are almost certainly lies, Stephen interrupted calmly. I've been in Parliament long enough to recognize a character assassination when I see one. Someone wanted you erased from society. I'd very much like to know why. Because I existed. Because Victoria couldn't stand my existence. It's complicated, Matilda managed. Most worthwhile things are. The music swelled and Stephen pulled her infinitesimally closer. Still proper, but protective. I'm going to ask you something, and I want you to answer honestly. Can you do that? Matilda nodded. Are you in danger? The question cut through every defense she'd built. Victoria's face flashed through her mind, beautiful, smiling, venomous. The locked doors, the destroyed reputation. The years of isolation. Yes, Matilda breathed. But not the kind you can protect me from. Try me, Stephen said simply. The dance ended too soon. Stephen escorted Matilda off the floor, his hand still at her elbow, a gesture everyone noticed. They reached the refreshment table, and he procured her a glass of lemonade with the kind of attention usually reserved for royalty. Lady Margaret, the town's most notorious gossip, materialized like a shark scenting blood. Your Grace! Her smile was sharp. What an interesting choice of dance partner. The ballroom fell silent, waiting for Stephen's response. This was the moment. The moment he'd distance himself. The moment he'd realize Matilda was social poison. The moment Victoria's lies would win. But Stephen didn't distance himself. Instead, he looked directly at Lady Margaret with the kind of cool, aristocratic disdain that could end social careers, and said clearly, loudly enough for everyone nearby to hear, "Miss Haynes is the most remarkable woman in this ballroom. Anyone who failed to notice is simply not paying attention." The declaration rang through the space like a bell. Lady Margaret's mouth opened and closed uselessly. Around them, whispers exploded, shock, curiosity, speculation. And at the entrance to the ballroom, just arriving with her husband, Victoria Haynes stood frozen in her emerald gown, her beautiful face contorting with pure, undiluted rage. Because Duke Stephen Doyle had just publicly chosen the girl Victoria spent 2 years destroying. And at that moment, the war began. The most powerful duke in England just declared Matilda remarkable in front of everyone who matters. But Victoria is watching, and she's about to unleash hell. Can one public dance really undo 2 years of carefully constructed lies? Or is Stephen's protection about to make Matilda's life infinitely more dangerous? Victoria Haynes was a woman who understood power. She clawed her way from near poverty into the Haynes household through calculated charm and strategic tears. She'd transformed Thomas from a grieving widower into a puppet who believed every lie she whispered. She'd spent 2 years systematically erasing Matilda from existence. And now Duke Stephen Doyle had undone everything in a single dance. The carriage ride home from the Ashford ball was silent, the kind of silence that precedes violence. Thomas sat across from Victoria, confused and uncomfortable. He'd seen Matilda at the ball. He'd seen the Duke dance with her, defend her, claim her publicly, and he'd seen something in his daughter's eyes he hadn't seen in years. Hope. It terrified him, because hope meant change and change meant confronting what he'd allowed Victoria to do. That was quite a spectacle, Thomas ventured carefully. Victoria's jaw was clenched so tight her teeth ached. "Your daughter," she said with venomous precision, "humiliated us, sneaking out, throwing herself at the Duke like some desperate—" "He asked her to dance," Thomas interrupted quietly. "I saw it." Victoria's eyes snapped to his, dangerous and cold. "She manipulated him somehow. She's always been cunning, Thomas. Surely you remember how she tried to seduce—" The Duke called her remarkable. Thomas's voice was stronger now, like a man waking from a long sleep. In front of everyone. "The Duke is a man," Victoria spat, "and men are easily fooled by a pretty face and false innocence. Trust me, darling, this infatuation will pass, especially once certain information reaches his ears." What information? What is Victoria planning now? Thomas wanted to ask, but the part of him Victoria had spent 2 years training into submission kept silent. Matilda returned home just before dawn. Charlotte's carriage dropped her at the garden gate, and she climbed back through her window with her heart still racing from the night's impossible events. She'd danced with a duke. She'd been seen. She'd been called remarkable. Could one night really change everything? She was about to discover the answer was both yes and no. When she woke late that morning, there were flowers on her vanity, a massive bouquet of white roses with a card in bold, masculine handwriting. "To the most remarkable woman in London. I hope to see you again soon. S.D." Matilda pressed the card to her chest, hardly daring to believe it was real. Mrs. Bennet appeared in the doorway, her face tight with worry. "They arrived an hour ago. She saw them being delivered." "Victoria knows?" "Everyone knows, miss. The Duke had them delivered in his personal carriage, in broad daylight. Every servant in London will have heard about it by tea time." Stephen wasn't being subtle. He was making a statement, and statements had consequences. The door slammed open without warning. Victoria stormed in, her beauty sharpened into something monstrous. She saw the roses and her face went white with rage. "Get rid of them," she hissed. "No." Matilda's voice was quiet but firm, the first time she'd refused her stepmother in 2 years. Victoria moved so fast Matilda didn't see it coming. She grabbed the bouquet and hurled it against the wall. Crystal vase shattered. Water and petals exploded across the floor. White roses scattered like broken bones. "You stupid, ungrateful girl!" Victoria's voice was barely human. "Do you think the Duke actually cares about you? You're a project to him, a curiosity, The moment he discovers what you really are. What am I, Victoria? Matilda stood, something new burning in her chest. Tell me, what terrible thing am I that deserves this? You're nothing, Victoria screamed. You're a ghost who should have stayed buried. The mask had slipped. For just a moment, Matilda saw the real woman beneath the beauty, jealous, insecure, desperately afraid of being replaced. You're afraid of me, Matilda breathed. You've always been afraid of me. Victoria's hand cracked across Matilda's face. The slap echoed through the room. Mrs. Bennet gasped from the doorway, and Matilda, clutching her burning cheek, felt something inside her transform from fear into fury. Get out, Victoria said coldly, and understand this. If you see that Duke again, if you even think about leaving this house, I will make sure your father knows every shameful, disgraceful lie I can invent. I will destroy you so completely that Stephen Doyle will beg me to remove you from his sight. She swept from the room, leaving Matilda trembling and Mrs. Bennet rushing to her side. We need to tell someone, the housekeeper whispered urgently. The Duke needs to know. He can't protect me from this, Matilda said quietly. No one can. But Matilda was wrong, because Stephen Doyle was not a man who accepted defeat. The next morning a carriage arrived, not flowers this time. Stephen himself, dressed impeccably and carrying a calling card for Thomas Haynes. Victoria intercepted him at the door, her smile perfectly in place. Your Grace, what an unexpected pleasure. Mrs. Haynes. Stephen's voice was polite ice. I've come to call on Miss Haynes. Is she receiving? I'm afraid Matilda is unwell today. Perhaps another time. Then I'll wait. Stephen walked past her into the foyer as if he owned it. Until she's well enough for a brief visit. Victoria's control was slipping, and she knew it. Thomas emerged from his study, confused. Your Grace, is something wrong? Not at all, Mr. Haynes. I simply wish to continue my acquaintance with your daughter. We had such a pleasant conversation at the ball. Stephen's eyes moved to Victoria, assessing. I trust there's no objection? Say yes, Father. Please, for once, say yes. Thomas looked between Victoria's rigid smile and Stephen's expectant gaze. Of course not. Matilda should be honored by your attention. Excellent. Mrs. Bennet? Stephen called to the housekeeper who'd appeared in the hallway. Would you inform Miss Haynes that I'm here? Victoria had been outmaneuvered in her own home. Matilda came downstairs 15 minutes later, her bruised cheek carefully concealed with powder. But Stephen saw it immediately. His eyes darkened, and something dangerous shifted in his expression. He said nothing, not yet, but Matilda saw him note it, file it away, add it to whatever case he was building against Victoria. Miss Haynes, he greeted warmly. I hope you're well. Quite well, Your Grace. Thank you. They sat in the formal parlor with Thomas and Victoria as chaperones. Proper, appropriate, suffocating. But Stephen navigated the tension masterfully. I'm hosting a garden party this weekend, he said casually. Small gathering. I'd be honored if you'd attend, Miss Haynes. Victoria's teacup rattled against its saucer. How generous, she said through clenched teeth. But Matilda has prior commitments. What commitments? Thomas asked suddenly. Matilda hasn't had social engagements in months. The room went silent. Victoria's eyes flashed dangerously. She's been unwell. As I've explained, she seems perfectly healthy to me, Stephen interrupted smoothly. In fact, Miss Haynes, you look absolutely radiant. His gaze held Victoria's. Unless there's some reason you'd prefer she remain isolated. The challenge hung in the air like a thrown gauntlet. Thomas shifted uncomfortably. Victoria's smile became brittle, and Matilda realized she was watching a master strategist dismantle her stepmother, piece by piece. No reason at all, Victoria forced out. Matilda would be delighted to attend. Wonderful. Stephen stood and Matilda rose with him. He took her hand and bowed over it. And in that brief moment, hidden from the others, his thumb brushed across her knuckles in silent reassurance. I see you. I see what's happening. And I'm not leaving you to face this alone. After Stephen left, Victoria's fury was apocalyptic. She destroyed Matilda's wardrobe, every gown, every shawl, every decent thing Matilda owned. She did it methodically with scissors, reducing silk and lace to ribbons. You have nothing appropriate for a Duke's garden party? Victoria said with savage satisfaction. What a shame you'll have to decline. But the next morning another delivery arrived. A dress. No, 3 dresses, each more beautiful than anything Matilda had ever owned. And a note. My mother had these made for my sister before she passed. They've been waiting for someone worthy of wearing them. I believe that someone is you. SD. Mrs. Bennet helped Matilda hide them in the attic, away from Victoria's scissors, and Lord Edmund Grey, Stephen's closest friend, arrived that afternoon with an unexpected message for Thomas Haynes. The Duke wishes to call upon Miss Haynes regularly. He hopes this will not be an inconvenience. Stephen wasn't courting Matilda quietly. He was courting her publicly, deliberately, in a way that made it impossible for Victoria to isolate her further. Every move Victoria made, Stephen countered. Destroyed invitations? Stephen sent duplicates directly to Matilda through Mrs. Bennet. Rumors spread about Matilda's impropriety. Stephen appeared in Hyde Park with Matilda in his carriage, visible to all of London. Attempts to keep Matilda confined? Stephen began visiting daily, making his interest so public that preventing Matilda from seeing him would require Thomas to insult a duke. The war had begun in earnest, and Victoria, for the first time in her life, was losing. Stephen's making his intentions clear, but can he really protect Matilda from a woman who lives under the same roof? And what happens when Victoria realizes she's losing control? Because a cornered animal is always the most dangerous. Lord Edmund Grey had served as Stephen's confidant for 15 years. They'd met at Oxford, bonded over a shared contempt for aristocratic pretension, and built a friendship based on brutal honesty and unwavering loyalty. Edmund knew when Stephen was strategizing, and Stephen was definitely strategizing. You're pursuing her, Edmund observed as they rode through Hyde Park 3 days after the Ashford ball. I am. After one dance. I needed less than one dance. Stephen's eyes tracked a pair of women walking nearby, neither of them Matilda, but he was always watching now, always aware of threats. Something's wrong in that household, Edmund. The way she flinched when her stepmother appeared. The bruise she tried to hide. The fact that a woman of her age and station has been completely absent from society for 2 years. Rumors said she was improper. Rumors are weapons. Someone's been wielding them very effectively. Stephen's jaw tightened. I want you to investigate Victoria Haynes. Where she came from, who she was before she married Thomas. Any debts, scandals, connections. Edmund smiled slowly. You think she's hiding something. I know she's hiding something. I just need proof. Victoria was, in fact, hiding several things. Her maiden name was Victoria Ashworth, daughter of a minor gentleman who'd gambled away the family fortune before dying in disgrace. She'd been 28, practically a spinster, when she met the grieving Thomas Haynes at a country house party. She'd studied him carefully. Wealthy, heartbroken, vulnerable. His wife had been dead 6 months. His daughter was 17 and still mourning. Victoria had seen an opportunity and taken it. Within 3 months, she was married. Within 6, she'd begun systematically destroying Matilda's reputation. Because Victoria understood something Thomas didn't. Households only had room for one queen, and she wasn't about to share her throne with a stepdaughter who reminded everyone of the beloved first wife. But now Duke Stephen Doyle was threatening everything, and Victoria Ashworth Haynes had not clawed her way into wealth and status to lose it to some infatuated nobleman and his naive project. She needed a new strategy. Something permanent. Matilda attended Stephen's garden party wearing one of the gifted dresses, pale lavender silk that made her look like spring itself. Charlotte accompanied her, along with Mrs. Bennet serving as a rather unorthodox chaperone. Victoria had tried to prevent all 3 from leaving, but Thomas, showing rare backbone, had overruled her. The Duke specifically invited her, Thomas had said quietly. We cannot insult him. It was the first time Thomas had chosen Matilda over Victoria in 2 years. The garden party was intimate, perhaps 30 guests, all carefully selected. Stephen had invited people he trusted, families with integrity, women with intelligence, men who valued substance over scandal. He'd created a safe space for Matilda, and she bloomed in it. Miss Haynes, Lady Catherine Drummond approached with genuine warmth. I was so pleased to see you at the Ashford ball. Your mother and I were dear friends. I've missed you terribly." People had missed her. People remembered her. The realization hit Matilda like light through clouds. Victoria's lies hadn't completely erased her. The real Matilda, the girl she'd been before the isolation, still existed in people's memories. Stephen appeared at her elbow, 2 glasses of lemonade in hand. "You're smiling," he observed. "It's extraordinary." "I'd forgotten what this felt like," Matilda admitted, "being part of things." "You belong here, Matilda." He'd started using her given name in private moments, and each time sent warmth through her chest. "You've always belonged. Someone just convinced you otherwise." Can one person's belief in you undo years of someone else's cruelty? Matilda was beginning to think it could. Edmund found Stephen before sunset with information. Victoria Ashworth was nearly destitute when she married Thomas Haynes, Edmund reported quietly. Her father's debts were substantial. Creditors were circling. Then suddenly she married money, and all her financial problems disappeared. She married for security. More than that, Edmund's expression darkened. "I spoke with her former lady's maid, the woman she dismissed right after the wedding. Victoria apparently told her that she wouldn't tolerate competition from a stepdaughter and that Matilda would need to be managed carefully." Managed, like a problem, like a threat. "She planned this from the beginning," Stephen said softly. "Yes, and there's more." Edmund handed him a letter. "This is correspondence between Victoria and Lord Pemberton's son, the boy she accused Matilda of seducing. He's admitting that Victoria paid him to claim Matilda had been inappropriate with him." Stephen's hands tightened on the letter until his knuckles went white. She fabricated the scandal. She bought false testimony. She systematically destroyed an innocent girl's reputation for, what, jealousy? Control? "Both, I'd wager." Edmund's voice was grim. "The question is, what do we do with this information?" Stephen looked across the garden to where Matilda sat with Charlotte, laughing at something Lady Catherine had said. She looked lighter than he'd ever seen her, freer, and he was about to go to war for her. "We give it to Thomas Haynes," Stephen decided. "Privately, let him see what his wife really is. And then we protect Matilda from the fallout." That night, Victoria made her move. She'd spent the day composing letters, carefully worded, strategically devastating, to every influential person in London. Letters claiming that Matilda had been institutionalized for mental instability. Letters suggesting she'd had an illegitimate child. Letters painting Stephen as a fool being manipulated by a cunning, damaged girl. If Victoria couldn't control Matilda's life, she'd destroy it completely. She sealed the letters with shaking hands, her jealousy and rage having finally overwhelmed her strategic mind. This wasn't calculated anymore. This was desperate. But Mrs. Bennet was watching. The housekeeper had served the Haynes family for 20 years. She'd loved Matilda's mother. She'd watched Matilda grow from a baby into the kind young woman she'd become, and she'd witnessed every cruelty Victoria had inflicted. She was done being silent. While Victoria slept, Mrs. Bennet carefully removed the letters from Victoria's writing desk and replaced them with blank paper. Then she took the originals directly to Duke Stephen Doyle's residence. The butler tried to turn her away. It was past midnight, but Mrs. Bennet was insistent. "Tell His Grace it's about Miss Matilda Haynes. Tell him it's urgent. Tell him someone's trying to destroy her permanently." Stephen appeared 5 minutes later, still dressed despite the hour. Mrs. Bennet handed him the letters with trembling hands. She was going to send these tomorrow. "Every lie you can imagine, Your Grace. Every vicious rumor. She's going to claim Miss Matilda is mad, improper, dangerous." Stephen read through them, his expression growing darker with each page. "She's escalating," he said quietly. "She knows she's losing, Your Grace, and a woman like Victoria, she'd rather destroy everything than admit defeat." How long has this been happening? The cruelty, the isolation? Mrs. Bennet's eyes filled with tears. 2 years, Your Grace. 2 years of watching that beautiful girl turn into a ghost. 2 years of Victoria poisoning Mr. Haynes against his own daughter. I have journals. I've documented everything. The locked doors, the destroyed clothing, the withheld meals, the slaps when no one was watching. Evidence. Finally irrefutable evidence. Mrs. Bennet, Stephen said carefully, would you be willing to testify to what you've witnessed in front of Mr. Haynes? I'd testify in front of God himself if it meant saving that girl. Stephen felt something settle in his chest, a decision made, a course set. Then tomorrow we end this. We bring Thomas the truth, we show him what his wife really is, and we get Matilda out of that house. And if Mr. Haynes doesn't believe us, Stephen's smile was sharp and utterly without mercy. Then I'll marry her anyway. Victoria Haynes has no power over a duchess. Matilda didn't know any of this was happening. She only knew that she'd returned home from the garden party feeling lighter than she had in years, and Victoria had been strange, too quiet, too controlled, dangerous. Did you enjoy yourself? Victoria asked over dinner, her voice unnaturally sweet. Yes, Matilda answered carefully. How wonderful. Victoria's smile didn't reach her eyes. Enjoy it while it lasts, darling, because everything can disappear so quickly. You of all people should know that. Thomas frowned. Victoria, what does that? Nothing, my love. She patted his hand, simply reminding Matilda how fortunate she is. For now, the threat hung in the air like poison. That night, Matilda lay awake, listening to the house settle, wondering if this brief taste of freedom was about to be snatched away again. She had no way of knowing that Stephen was already 10 steps ahead. She had no way of knowing that Mrs. Bennet had already betrayed Victoria's secrets. She had no way of knowing that tomorrow everything would finally break open. But she was about to find out. The evidence is gathered. The allies are assembled. But when the truth finally comes out, will Thomas choose to see it? Or will he remain blind to Victoria's cruelty one final time? And what will Victoria do when she realizes she's been exposed? Thomas Haynes had been avoiding mirrors for 2 years. Not literally, though some mornings he could barely look at his own reflection. But metaphorically, emotionally, he'd been avoiding any surface that might show him the truth of what he'd become. He'd been a good man once, a loving father, a devoted husband to his first wife, Matilda's mother. But grief had hollowed him out, and Victoria had filled the empty spaces with poison disguised as comfort. How does a man betray his own daughter without even realizing he's doing it? Slowly, through 1,000 small choices to believe the easier lie. That morning, Duke Stephen Doyle requested a private meeting. Thomas agreed, curious and slightly nervous. The Duke's interest in Matilda was becoming the talk of London, flattering for the family but also concerning. Victoria had warned him that Stephen was being manipulated, that Matilda was playing innocent while scheming for a title. But deep down in the part of himself Thomas had been ignoring, he knew that didn't sound like his daughter at all. Stephen arrived with Lord Edmund and, surprisingly, Mrs. Bennet. Thomas received them in his study, confused by the unusual grouping. Your Grace, is something wrong? That depends on your definition of wrong, Mr. Haynes. Stephen's voice was calm but carried weight. We need to discuss your daughter and your wife. Thomas's stomach dropped. I don't understand. Your wife has been systematically destroying Matilda for 2 years, Stephen said bluntly. Isolating her, abusing her, fabricating scandals, and attempting to erase her from society completely. That's absurd. Victoria has been trying to protect Matilda from her own poor judgment. No, Mr. Haynes. Stephen's gray eyes were steel. Victoria has been protecting her own position. And I have proof. Edmund laid out the documents. The letter from Lord Pemberton's son admitting Victoria had paid him to lie. Financial records showing Victoria's desperate circumstances before her marriage. Correspondence revealing her deliberate campaign against Matilda. And Mrs. Bennet's journals. 2 years of witness cruelty, documented with dates and details. Thomas read through them, and his world collapsed. No, he whispered. This can't. Victoria wouldn't. I watched her slap Miss Matilda across the face 3 days ago, Mrs. Bennet said quietly. I've watched her lock your daughter in her room for days without adequate food. I've watched her destroy Matilda's clothing, intercept her correspondence, and spread lies about her to anyone who would listen. Why didn't you tell me? Because you wouldn't have believed me, sir. You believed her instead. The truth of it hit Thomas like a physical blow. He thought about the last 2 years, how he'd accepted Victoria's explanations without question, how he'd stopped spending time with Matilda because Victoria said it encouraged her inappropriate behavior, how his bright, loving daughter had become a silent ghost, and he'd told himself it was just a phase. He'd chosen comfort over truth, and his daughter had paid the price. "Where is Matilda now?" Thomas asked hoarsely. "In her room, I believe," Mrs. Bennet answered. "She doesn't know we're having this conversation." Thomas stood abruptly. "I need to speak with Victoria." "Mr. Haynes," Stephen's voice stopped him. "Before you do, you should know. She sent letters last night. Terrible letters, claiming Matilda is mentally unstable, morally corrupt, dangerous. She was planning to send them to every influential family in London this morning." "Was?" Mrs. Bennet intercepted them. Stephen's expression was hard. "But the fact that your wife attempted this tells you everything you need to know. She's not protecting your daughter. She's destroying her." Thomas's hands shook with rage and shame. "I need to hear it from her. I need to know that you're not the villain in this story." Stephen's voice softened slightly. "Mr. Haynes, you were manipulated, but now you know the truth. The question is, what will you do about it?" Victoria was in the morning room, calmly reading correspondence when Thomas entered. She looked up with her perfect smile, the smile he'd once found beautiful and now saw as a mask. "Darling, I didn't expect you back so soon. How was your meeting with— Did you pay Lord Pemberton's son to lie about Matilda?" Victoria's smile froze. "Thomas, what are you talking about? Answer the question." His voice was a stranger's, hard, unforgiving. "Did you fabricate the scandal?" "Of course not. Someone's been feeding you lies." "I have the letter, Victoria, written in his own hand, admitting you paid him." Silence fell like a guillotine blade. Victoria's face went through several expressions: shock, calculation, fury, before settling on wounded innocence. "You'd believe some boy's word over mine? Your wife's? I also have Mrs. Bennet's journals, 2 years of documented abuse." Thomas stepped closer. "Did you slap my daughter? Did you lock her in her room? Did you systematically destroy everything she had?" "She deserved it," Victoria snapped, her control finally breaking. "She was always there, always perfect, always reminding everyone of your precious first wife. I couldn't compete with a dead woman's memory and her living ghost of a daughter." The mask shattered. Thomas stared at the woman he'd married and saw a stranger, jealous, cruel, insecure. "So you destroyed her," he breathed. "My daughter, my child, you destroyed her because you were jealous?" "She was ruining everything." Victoria was on her feet now, all pretense gone. "Everyone loved her. Everyone remembered her mother. I was just the new wife, the replacement, the woman who could never measure up. So yes, I made sure she wasn't a threat anymore. By making her disappear. By putting her in her place," Victoria's voice was shrill. "And it worked, Thomas. For 2 years it worked perfectly. I was the mistress of this house, the only woman who mattered, and everything was fine until that meddling duke decided to play hero." Thomas felt sick. "What about me? Did you ever love me, or was I just—" "You were convenient," Victoria said with brutal honesty. "Wealthy, grieving, easy to manipulate. I needed security, and you needed someone to tell you what to think. We both got what we wanted." The cruelty was breathtaking. "Get out," Thomas whispered. "What?" "Get out of my house." His voice grew stronger. "Pack your things. Leave. I don't care where you go. But you're not staying here another night." Victoria laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "You can't throw me out. I'm your wife. Legally, you can't." "Then we'll see what a lawyer says about fraud, abuse, and conspiracy." Thomas's jaw set. "One way or another, Victoria, you're done." "You'll regret this," Victoria screamed. "I'll ruin you. I'll ruin her. By the time I'm finished, Matilda will wish I'd actually succeeded in erasing her completely." The door burst open. Matilda stood there, pale as death, with Stephen right behind her. She'd heard everything. Victoria's face twisted with rage when she saw them. "You," she hissed at Stephen, "this is your fault. You had to interfere. You had to play the noble duke, rescuing the poor damsel." "No, Mrs. Haynes." Stephen's voice was ice. "This is your fault. You chose cruelty. You chose lies. You chose to hurt someone who never did anything to deserve it. She existed, Victoria shrieked. That's what she did. She existed and reminded everyone that I'm not her, that I'll never be her precious mother. Matilda stepped forward, trembling but resolute. You're right, she said quietly. You'll never be my mother. My mother was kind. She was gentle. She loved my father genuinely and raised me with warmth and grace. Her voice grew stronger. You're everything she wasn't, Victoria. And that's your failure, not mine. Victoria's hand rose to slap her, the same motion Matilda had endured before. But Stephen moved between them faster than thought. Touch her again, he said softly, dangerously, and I will ensure you never show your face in polite society for the rest of your life. Victoria backed down, but her eyes were pure venom. You think you've won? She looked between Matilda and Stephen. You think marriage to a duke will erase what you are? You're damaged, Matilda. Broken. He'll realize it eventually, and when he does... I've survived you, Matilda interrupted, her voice clear and certain. That's all the proof I need that I'm strong enough to survive anything. Victoria's face crumpled, not with sadness, but with the rage of someone who's finally, definitively lost. Thomas spoke from behind them, his voice heavy with regret. Victoria, you have until this evening to collect your things and leave. If you're not gone by sunset, I'll have you forcibly removed. Where am I supposed to go? I don't care, Thomas said flatly. You destroyed my relationship with my daughter for 2 years. You manipulated me. You lied. You hurt the one person I should have protected above everyone else. His voice broke. I don't care where you go. Just go. Victoria left the room in a tornado of silk and fury, her threats echoing behind hers. When she was gone, Thomas turned to Matilda with tears in his eyes. I'm so sorry, he whispered. I'm so sorry. Matilda didn't move toward him, not yet. The wounds were too fresh. But Stephen's hand found hers steady and warm, and for the first time in 2 years, Matilda could breathe. The truth is out. Victoria is exposed, but a cornered villain is always the most dangerous. Will she really leave quietly? Or does she have one more weapon left to use? And with Victoria gone, can Matilda and her father ever repair what's been broken? Victoria didn't leave quietly. She spent the afternoon systematically destroying everything beautiful in the Haynes household, smashing vases, shredding curtains, upending furniture. The servants fled to other rooms, and Thomas locked himself in his study, unable to watch the woman he'd married reveal herself completely. But Matilda watched. She stood in the doorway of what had been Victoria's sitting room and watched the beautiful monster tear apart her own cage. There was something almost tragic about it. Victoria had spent 2 years building a perfect prison for Matilda, not realizing she'd locked herself in too. Are you satisfied? Victoria hissed when she noticed Matilda watching. You've destroyed my life. No, Matilda said quietly. You did that yourself. Victoria threw a crystal paperweight that shattered against the wall inches from Matilda's head. Stephen appeared instantly, placing himself between them, and Victoria laughed, sharp and broken. The heroic Duke, she sneered. Tell me, Your Grace, do you actually love her? Or is this just your ego, the powerful man saving the helpless girl? I don't answer to you, by did I? Stephen replied calmly. You will when you realize what you've tied yourself to. She's broken, Stephen. Damaged. Weak. She'll never be the wife a duke needs. She's the strongest person I've ever met, Stephen interrupted. She survived you. That alone makes her extraordinary. Victoria's face twisted with hate. This isn't over. I'll make sure everyone knows. Know what? The truth? Stephen's smile was dangerous. Please do. Tell everyone how you fabricated scandals, paid for false testimony, and abused your stepdaughter for 2 years. I'm certain society will be very understanding. Victoria realized she had no weapons left, no lies that would work, no power that remained. She grabbed her belongings, what little she could carry, and swept toward the door. But she stopped in front of Matilda one last time. You think you've won, Victoria whispered, but you'll always be the girl I made you, small, afraid, invisible. Matilda met her stepmother's eyes without flinching. I'd rather be invisible than cruel. Victoria left without another word. The house felt lighter the moment she was gone, as if her presence had been pressing down on the foundations like a weight. Stephen stayed close to Matilda as the servants began cleaning the damage Victoria had wrought. Are you all right? He asked quietly. I don't know, Matilda admitted. I should feel victorious. But I mostly just feel tired. That's normal. You've been fighting for so long. And now what? She looked up at him. Victoria's gone. My father knows the truth. But what happens next? Do I just, return to society, pretend the last 2 years didn't happen? Stephen took her hand carefully. I have a different suggestion. What? Marry me. The words hung in the air like suspended light. Matilda stared at him, certain she'd misheard. What? Marry me, Stephen repeated, his gray eyes absolutely serious. I know it's fast. I know we've only known each other a week. But Matilda, I saw you across that ballroom and I knew. You're brilliant, resilient, kind, despite every reason not to be. And I don't want to waste time courting you properly when I already know exactly what I want. You can't possibly. I can, and I do. He stepped closer. I'm not asking you to love me yet. I'm asking you to let me prove I'm worth loving. I'm asking you to marry me, become my duchess, and build a life where no one can ever make you feel invisible again. Matilda's heart hammered against her ribs. Stephen, this is insane. Probably, he agreed with a slight smile. But I've never been more certain of anything in my life. What if I'm too damaged? What if Victoria was right and You're not broken, Stephen said fiercely. You're wounded. There's a difference. Broken things can't heal. Wounded things can, with time, safety, and love. And you think you can offer that? I think I can try out, and I think you deserve someone who will spend the rest of their life trying. Matilda's eyes filled with tears. Not sad ones this time, but overwhelmed ones. This is crazy, she whispered. Is that a no? It's a yes. Stephen's face transformed. Relief and joy, and something deeper Matilda was only beginning to recognize. Yes? Yes, Matilda laughed through her tears. Though you should probably ask my father formally before already planning to. Stephen pulled her close. Proper, respectable, but intimate. Matilda Haynes, you've made me the happiest man in England. I haven't done anything yet. You survived. You exist. You're here. His voice was rough with emotion. That's everything. Thomas was in his study when Stephen knocked. He looked up, his face haggard with guilt and regret. Your Grace, I'm surprised you're still here after everything. Mr. Haynes, I've come to ask for your daughter's hand in marriage. Thomas's pen clattered to the desk. What? I'd like to marry Matilda, with your permission and blessing. Thomas stood slowly, studying the Duke with new eyes. You barely know her. I know enough. I know she's extraordinary. I know she deserves better than what she's had. And I know I want to spend my life ensuring she never feels invisible again. And Matilda? Does she want this? She said yes. Thomas's eyes filled with tears. Your Grace, I don't deserve your respect after what I've allowed to happen. I failed my daughter completely. Then spend the rest of your life making it right, Stephen said quietly. Let me take her somewhere safe. Let me give her the life she should have had, and repair your relationship with her over time, if she's willing. Thomas sank into his chair. You're a better man than I am. I'm a man who sees clearly. You were manipulated, Mr. Haynes. That doesn't excuse your choices, but it explains them. The question is, will you let your daughter find happiness now, or will guilt make you stand in her way? I won't stand in her way, Thomas said hoarsely. If Matilda wants this, if she wants you, then you have my blessing. And my gratitude. Stephen extended his hand. I'll take care of her. See that you do, because if you hurt her, Thomas's voice gained strength. Duke or not, I'll make you answer for it. For the first time since his wife died, Thomas Haynes sounded like a father again. The announcement appeared in the papers the next morning. Duke Stephen Doyle, Duke of Ashford, is pleased to announce his engagement to Miss Matilda Haynes, daughter of Mr. Thomas Haynes. The wedding will take place in 3 weeks at St. George's Chapel. London exploded with speculation. 3 weeks? That was scandalously fast. And Matilda Haynes, wasn't she the girl with the ruined reputation? The one Victoria Haynes had said was improper? But then the second wave of information hit. Lord Edmund Grey, speaking with perfect timing at his club, mentioned that Victoria Haynes had been discovered to have fabricated certain allegations and had left London in disgrace. Lady Catherine Drummond hosted a tea where she accidentally let slip that Victoria had been cruel beyond measure to her stepdaughter and that the Duke's rescue of dear Matilda was the most romantic thing London had seen in decades. The narrative shifted. Suddenly, Matilda wasn't the scandalous girl. She was the victim of a cruel stepmother, a real-life Cinderella story. And Duke Stephen Doyle wasn't being manipulated. He was the hero who'd seen through the lies and claimed his princess. Society loves a redemption arc, and this one was irresistible. Victoria heard about the engagement from her rented room in the shabbiest part of London. She'd been reduced to selling her jewelry to pay for lodging. Her reputation was destroyed. No one would receive her. Thomas had cut off her access to funds. She was exactly where she'd been before marrying him, desperate, alone, powerless. But she had one weapon left: rage. She wrote one final letter, sealed it carefully, and paid a street urchin to deliver it to Matilda. The letter arrived 2 days before the wedding. Enjoy your Duke while you can, but know this: you'll never escape what I made you. Every time you look in the mirror, you'll see the ghost I created. Every time someone questions your worth, you'll remember my voice. You think you've won, but I live in your head now, and I'll be there forever. V. Matilda read it once, then handed it to Stephen without a word. He read it, his expression darkening. She's trying to haunt you from a distance. I know. She wants you to believe you're still broken. I know that too. Stephen looked at her carefully. Are you? Matilda took a slow breath, feeling the weight of 2 years of cruelty, and then the lightness of freedom that was beginning to replace it. No, she said finally, I'm wounded. Like you said, but wounds heal. And I have time now, I have safety, I have you. She met his eyes. Victoria doesn't live in my head anymore, Stephen. She's just an angry woman in a cheap room writing desperate letters. And I'm about to become a duchess. Stephen smiled, proud and fierce. Yes, you are. He threw Victoria's letter into the fireplace, and they watched it burn together. 3 days before the wedding, Thomas asked to speak with Matilda. She agreed, wary but willing to listen. They sat in the garden, the same garden where Charlotte had thrown pebbles at Matilda's window just weeks ago. It felt like a lifetime had passed since then. I don't expect your forgiveness, Thomas began. I don't deserve it, but I need you to know I'm sorry. I failed you in every possible way. Yes, Matilda agreed quietly. You did. Thomas flinched but didn't argue. Your mother would be ashamed of me. I let grief make me weak, and I let Victoria twist that weakness into something monstrous. I chose comfort over truth. I chose my own peace over your safety. His voice broke. I'm so sorry, Matilda. I know. She studied her father, older, diminished, finally seeing clearly. But sorry doesn't erase 2 years of isolation, Father. It doesn't undo the nights I cried myself to sleep, wondering why you stopped loving me. I never stopped. Yes, you did, Matilda interrupted. Maybe not in your heart, but in your actions. And actions are what matter. Silence stretched between them, painful, honest. Can we ever? Thomas couldn't finish. I don't know, Matilda said truthfully. Maybe someday, but not yet. The wound is too fresh. Thomas nodded, tears streaming down his face. I understand, but please know I'll always spend the rest of my life trying to deserve another chance. Then start, Matilda said softly. Start by being the father I used to know. Start by choosing truth over comfort. Start by never letting anyone make you forget who I am again. I won't, Thomas promised. I swear on your mother's memory, I won't. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was a beginning. The wedding is 3 days away. Victoria is banished. Thomas is broken with regret. But Matilda is finally, truly free. Can someone who spent 2 years as a ghost really become a duchess? and what happens when the invisible girl becomes impossible to ignore. Chapter 7 is the finale, where Matilda claims her future, Victoria faces her fate, and true love proves stronger than cruelty. The morning of Matilda's wedding, she woke to sunlight and silence. No Victoria screaming, no locked doors, no fear pressing down on her chest like a weight. Just light, streaming through windows she was allowed to open. In a room she was allowed to leave. Freedom she was learning felt like breathing after years underwater. Charlotte arrived at dawn, bursting with energy and excitement, carrying Matilda's wedding gown, a creation of ivory silk and delicate lace that Stephen had commissioned from London's finest modiste. "You're getting married today," Charlotte said with barely contained glee. "Married to the Duke of Ashford. Do you realize how incredible this is?" "I'm still processing it," Matilda admitted, touching the gown with reverent fingers. "Process faster. We have 4 hours to transform you into a duchess." Mrs. Bennet appeared with breakfast and tears in her eyes. "Your mother would be so proud, Miss Matilda. So very proud." "Thank you for everything," Matilda said softly. "For protecting me, for documenting the truth, for never giving up on me. You made it easy, miss. You never broke, no matter how hard she tried to break you." Mrs. Bennet squeezed her hand. "That's real strength." Across London in a cramped boarding house, Victoria Haynes woke to darkness and despair. She had no invitations, no prospects, no allies. The few people who'd received her after the scandal had quickly shut their doors when the full truth emerged. London society had made its judgment. Victoria was cruel, manipulative, and unwelcome. She tried spreading more rumors about Matilda, claiming the wedding was a farce, that Stephen would realize his mistake, that Matilda was still the improper girl Victoria had always claimed. But no one listened, because Duke Stephen Doyle had made his choice publicly, definitively, and with the kind of certainty that made society fall in line. To doubt his judgment was to insult him, and no one insulted the Duke of Ashford. Victoria sat in her dingy room, surrounded by the ruins of her ambition, and realized she'd lost completely. Some prisons are built with bars, others are built with bitterness. Victoria had constructed her own cage, and she'd be living in it for the rest of her life. St. George's Chapel was packed with London's elite, every pew filled with aristocrats, politicians, influential families, all there to witness the Duke of Ashford marry the girl who'd been invisible just weeks ago. It was the social event of the season, and everyone wanted to say they'd been present. Stephen stood at the altar with Lord Edmund beside him, both men impeccably dressed. But Stephen's focus was entirely on the chapel doors, waiting. "Nervous?" Edmund asked quietly. "Not even slightly," Stephen replied. "Impatient, perhaps." "You're really doing this, marrying a girl you met 3 weeks ago." "I'm marrying the woman I want to spend my life with. The timeline is irrelevant." The organ began to play, and the congregation rose. The doors opened, and Matilda appeared. She looked ethereal. The ivory gown transformed her from the frightened girl who'd sneaked into the Ashford ball into something luminous and powerful. Her dark hair was arranged in an elegant style, her mother's pearls at her throat, and a delicate veil framing her face. But it was her expression that took Stephen's breath away. She wasn't walking towards him like a rescued victim. She was walking towards him like a woman choosing her future. Thomas escorted her down the aisle, his last act as her father before giving her to someone who'd protect her properly. His face was a mixture of pride and regret, love and shame. When they reached the altar, Thomas placed Matilda's hand in Stephen's. "Take care of her," he whispered. "Always," Stephen promised. And Thomas stepped back, letting his daughter go. The ceremony was beautiful. Traditional vows, spoken clearly by both bride and groom, the archbishop's blessing, the exchange of rings. Every ritual performed perfectly. But the moment that mattered most was when Stephen lifted Matilda's veil and looked at her with absolute certainty. "Hello, Duchess," he said softly for her ears alone. "Hello, husband," Matilda replied and smiled, genuinely, radiantly, freely. They kissed to thunderous applause, and Matilda Haynes became Matilda Doyle, Duchess of Ashford. The invisible girl had become impossible to ignore. The reception was held at Stephen's London residence, the same place where the Ashford Ball had been held just 3 weeks earlier. But this time, Matilda wasn't sneaking in through borrowed invitations. She was the guest of honor, the bride, the Duchess. People who'd ignored her for 2 years now competed for her attention. Women who'd believed Victoria's lies now gushed about how they'd always known dear Matilda was special. Society is nothing if not adaptable. Charlotte pulled Matilda aside during the dancing. How does it feel, being celebrated instead of condemned? Strange, Matilda admitted. Wonderful, but strange. A month ago, these same people believed I was improper and ruined. Now they're acting like they always supported me. That's because the Duke supported you. And society follows power. Charlotte squeezed her hand. But you earned this, Matilda. You survived. You didn't break, and now you're exactly where you deserve to be. Stephen appeared, extending his hand. May I have this dance, wife? You may, Matilda said, taking his hand. They moved onto the floor together, and the crowd parted for them. No longer because Matilda was scandalous, but because she was a duchess and deserved respect. Happy? Stephen asked as they waltzed. I'm not sure I remember what happy feels like, Matilda admitted, but I think I'm getting close. We have time, a lifetime, in fact. A lifetime, Matilda repeated, testing the words. That sounds impossible. Get used to the impossible. It's our specialty. Weeks turned into months. Matilda adjusted to her new life with surprising grace. She'd been raised for this world, after all, before Victoria had tried to erase her. The social skills came back. The confidence grew. The fear slowly diminished. Stephen proved to be exactly what he'd promised. Patient, supportive, genuinely devoted to her happiness. He didn't rush her healing. He didn't demand she immediately love him. He simply existed beside her, steady and unwavering. Until one day Matilda realized she'd fallen in love with him without even noticing. It happened during breakfast. Stephen was reading parliamentary reports, absently reaching for his coffee, when Matilda suddenly thought, I would be devastated if I lost him. And she realized this was love. Not the dramatic, desperate kind from novels, but the quiet, certain kind that felt like coming home. I love you, she said abruptly. Stephen looked up from his papers, eyes widening slightly. What? I love you, Matilda repeated more confidently. I just thought you should know. Stephen's face transformed with joy. It's about time. I've been in love with you since the Ashford Ball. You have not. I absolutely have. You walked into that ballroom looking terrified and brave, and I thought, that's her. That's the woman I have been waiting for. Matilda laughed, truly, freely. That's insane. Probably. Stephen came around the table and pulled her close. But I've never been more certain of anything. He kissed her, and Matilda felt the last piece of Victoria's damage finally break away. She was whole. She was loved. She was free. 5 years later, the Duchess of Ashford hosted a garden party at the Ashford estate, now her home, her sanctuary, her kingdom. Matilda moved through her guests with practiced grace, her 2-year-old daughter perched on her hip and her 4-year-old son chasing butterflies nearby. She'd become exactly what Victoria had feared, confident, powerful, beloved. Charlotte attended with her own husband and children. Lord Edmund and his wife were there. Thomas Haynes came too, older, humbler, working patiently to rebuild his relationship with his daughter. They'd never fully healed the rift, but they were trying. Your Grace, Lady Catherine approached with a warm smile. Your home is beautiful, and your children are delightful. Thank you. Matilda adjusted her daughter's hair ribbon. We're very blessed. The Duke mentioned you are opening a charity for young women in difficult family situations. Yes, Matilda's voice was firm. I want to help girls who feel invisible, girls being abused or manipulated or erased. I want them to know they're not alone. What a wonderful mission. Will you need volunteers? Always. Matilda had transformed her pain into purpose. The girl who'd survived Victoria's cruelty was now protecting others from similar fates. The invisible girl was making sure no one else had to disappear. That evening, after the guests had left and the children were asleep, Matilda and Stephen sat in their private garden. I heard something interesting today, Stephen said casually. Oh, Victoria's been seen in Bath, living in a boarding house, alone. Apparently, she tried to ingratiate herself with some families there, but your charity's reputation preceded her. No one will receive her. Matilda felt nothing, no satisfaction, no vindication, no anger. That's sad, she said quietly. Stephen looked at her, surprised. You pity her? Not pity, but I understand her now. She was so afraid of being nothing that she made herself into something monstrous. And now she actually is nothing. Matilda leaned against her husband. I'm grateful I chose differently. You chose courage. I chose survival. And then I chose happiness. She smiled at him. I chose you. Best decision you ever made, Stephen said with mock arrogance. Second best, Matilda corrected. The best was climbing down that trellis to attend your ball. Our ball, Stephen amended, because it changed both our lives. They sat in comfortable silence, watching stars emerge above their estate. Matilda thought about the girl she'd been, frightened, isolated, invisible. And she thought about the woman she'd become, strong, loved, powerful. Victoria had tried to make her a ghost, but Matilda Doyle, Duchess of Ashford, was very much alive, and she was never going to be invisible again. 15 years later, Victoria Ashworth Haynes died alone in a Bath boarding house at age 62. No one attended her funeral, no one mourned. The few people who remembered her recalled a bitter, cruel woman who'd destroyed her own life through jealousy and manipulation. She was buried in an unmarked grave, forgotten within weeks. Matilda Doyle lived to see her children grown, married, and happy. She remained Duchess of Ashford for 57 years, becoming one of London's most beloved figures. Her charity helped hundreds of young women escape abuse. Her marriage to Stephen was considered one of the great love stories of their generation. When she passed peacefully in her sleep at age 79, surrounded by children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren, the entire nation mourned. They buried her beside Stephen, who'd preceded her by 2 years, under a headstone that read, Matilda Doyle, Duchess of Ashford, beloved wife, mother, and friend. She was told she was invisible. She proved she was unforgettable. And so the invisible girl became a legend. The Duke who saw her when no one else could became the love of her life. The stepmother who tried to erase her became nothing but a cautionary tale about the price of cruelty. Because in the end, kindness always outlasts malice. Love always defeats hate. And some people refuse to stay invisible, no matter how hard others try to make them disappear. Thank you for following Matilda's journey from ghost to Duchess. If her story moved you, hit that subscribe button and share this with someone who needs to hear that they matter, that they're seen, that they're remarkable. Because everyone deserves to be chosen. Everyone deserves to be loved. And no one deserves to be invisible.